Let's talk about the emotional pull of print.
Sure.
So how would you define it, especially in relation to other mediums, considering we live in this fast-paced digital world? And, I point to the fact that when I sit down with a magazine, it's a slightly different emotion. So dig into that for a little bit.
Sure. And I'm going to try to do a little bit, right, of some storytelling, give some first party, interesting bits of myself, a little subjectivity, and then obviously flow in some of the actual data points that I think help to drive home some of the points that maybe come across. One of the things I always found fascinating, right, that idea of how can you get a leg up in advertising, right? So there's the psychological effects that I remember learning about so many moons ago back in college. And I think it actually started, I wanted to look into those things because I remember watching a documentary about Jim Morrison from The Doors, right, obviously. And he used to study the psychological effects of the masses, right, and how to control the masses. So I always thought that was really interesting. Like, wow, here's a musician not just playing for the love of it, but actually using science in order to better his performance and better his overall impact in what he was doing. And I think we find that you can do the same thing in the advertising space, right? And if you start taking a look at digital versus print, and we'll keep it static to static, because I do believe a lot of the studies that are conducted try to keep it as apples to apples as possible.
Right.
And I think if you start trying to compare video in the digital space, maybe to print in something like magazines, it's not quite apples to apples anymore. But one of the things that you start to see, and you compare the effects of print to what happens in digital, and there's the science behind it from studies from like Millward Brown, Canada Post. I know the USPS has done a lot of studies. It's fascinating that not only is there the impact of the image itself, right? Like the colors you use in color theory and the messaging all plays a role, but the medium itself actually changes the impact of your messaging. So it's actually part and parcel, right? It all works together in order to really deliver your message in the way that you want it to be delivered and especially how you want it to be received. And when they take a look at like the Millward Brown studies, taking a look at fMRIs, what they actually find is print compared to digital stimulates the right, and I'm going to look at this because I don't want to mess this up, the right retrosplenial cortex. And what that is, the part of the brain that is responsible for processing emotionally powerful stimuli and memory. So you're not just delivering a 2D message, so to speak. It's actually resonating in the brain differently when on print versus what you're seeing on the digital screen. Not only that, it actually stimulates the cerebellum, which is responsible for spatial and emotional processing. So when you start to overlay all of this, the effects of advertising in print versus digital start to create these subconscious actions, right? Things like they've actually found that when they study and interview people during these studies, that they believe that they even have purchased and used the product that they have actually only seen in print advertising because of the way it resonates deep in your brain in those particular parts associated to memory and emotional stimuli.